I tell you, this thing has got a view to die for. You can see for miles right up here. So super cool spot. Now we got to go mow this, get the little trees. I'm going to disc it, fertilize it. If this will grow corn, I'm going to try and put corn here. I mean, it's a great draw for a destination plot like what this is. It's about almost 5 acres, so it'll hold some deer. So well guys, things are going really good over at the 80. We just finished up planting that corn, that food plot you guys seen earlier in the week. Now we're kind of caught up there, so I've kind of got bit by the 3D bug again. I used to shoot a little competition about 20 years ago before I moved to Iowa. I really want to get back into it. I went on a 3D shoot here about 10 days ago and shot really well, actually, surprisingly well. So now I'm going to set this VTM up for 3D. I'm putting my spot hog sight on it. I've got a new Orion arrow from Sirius that we're going to set up for 3D. And I went with the Orion because I wanted less wind drift. I was shooting the Supernova and it seems to be windy here all the time, so it was just making it difficult in the wind. So went with the smaller diameter, the smaller vane. It's got a tack vane, a 2.25 driver on it, so 4-fletched. I want to see what this will do on the old 3D course, so I'm excited about that. We'll get this set up and sight it in today, and hopefully we'll hit a 3D tournament this weekend. So peep sight will be different. I'm gonna run my hunting peep on this, which most of the time guys have a peep sight that is just one size. This, I went to specialty archery where you can change out the apertures on it. So I'll definitely go to a smaller aperture. I'll probably bump the scope out to whatever lines up with the smaller aperture where I get just a nice little halo around my scope. Speed wise, I'm going to shoot a lighter arrow, try to get that 280 feet a second. You know, maybe pushing 300 unless you're going to shoot ASA. I'm going to be right at 280 because that's their speed limit. All right, next step for me is to paper tune. That'll get my center shot, my knocking point real close, and then we'll go to a walk back tune or French tune to fine tune that. So let's paper tune it, see what we got. Not a bad start, just a little bit tail right. So we'll bump that rest just a little to the left. Might move that knocking point up just a hair as well. All right, shoot that again. Gosh, all close, just a skosh to the right. All right guys, I think we're good on the initial tuning. I'm just gonna start the walk back tuning process, but first I need to get sighted in to some extent. So I'm gonna shoot a few here and then we'll do some fine tuning. While I'm doing that, I wanted to invite you guys, anything that you would like archery related you want me to go over, would love to do it. I've been shooting a long time and I just really enjoy it. So if you guys want me to cover something, let me know. But in the meantime, we're gonna join Zach Rozmus on his first farm as he gives us an update on that.
All right guys, hopefully you guys enjoyed Owen's segment today, and we're back down here on Area 52. This is kind of a project farm for me, and one of the things that we talked about this off season with Gavin and Josh and I is that we wanted to kind of revisit this property. You know, this has very much been a labor of love for me, you know, and my wife, that we're coming into our 3rd year of ownership, and it's kind of starting to feel like it's a finished product down here. as you can see behind me, there's a nurse crop of oats and some alfalfa, and we just wanted to revisit, you know, kind of some of the plans that I originally had with this property, how that's maybe changed a little bit, and then also kind of recap, because last time we left this property, you know, essentially we had our first year of row crop in it. Actually, later on today, the farmer that actually cash rents from us is going to be showing up, or we're going to be doing another year of row crop. It's going to be corn this year, but one of the things that is the ultimate goal for this property is we don't want it to be tillable for a long period of time. You know, the way that the current farm bill is set up, you have to farm a property for 4 out of 6 years in order for it to be eligible for CRP. So one of the things that we're trying to do for a return on investment, I'd love to plant all this behind me into, you know, standing natives. You know, that would be my ultimate goal, to be able to do that, and then just have an area of food plots that I just do myself. But for like a return on investment standpoint, that's too much money that's sitting there, you know, kind of with when it comes down to it, for like being able to have this as a property to make it cash flow itself. Because, you know, there's roughly 25 acres of tillable on this property. I'd love to have about half of that into actual CRP, and that will ultimately maybe not be my property someday, but ultimately that could be the difference between somebody owning this property and not being able to own this property. So I think for this property specifically, for long term, you know, it would be great to be able to get those acres into CRP to really get that return on investment for not only me, but also potential future owners, because a lot of those contracts are going to be 15 to 30 years. So with this being a larger timber tract, you know, this is a 90-acre farm, and about 60 acres of that is broken down into timber. And one of the things that I really wanted to try to do, and kind of was one of my original goals with this property, was to diversify habitat. And, you know, when it comes down to native standing grasses or forbs, you know, a lot of times when it comes down to it, you know, I'm diversifying where I'm providing food during different periods of the time of the year with warm season grasses. The forbs that are in there are going to be good for browse at different times of the year. And also it's going to be different than the timber habitat, where maybe it's going to provide shelter for fawning, or also periods of the time of the year where maybe the timber isn't providing, you know, the same type of shelter, you know, during those times of the year. So that's definitely going to be something that I think is going to enhance this property. Although it's a little bit frustrating for the time being that it has to continue to be row crop, it's something that I think it's a means to an end, you know, type of thing when it comes down to it, where it's working towards an ultimate goal. And although I want it to fast track sometimes, I think it's going to really benefit this property for the long term. So this is a really cool spot. This is a location on the farm that we've always kind of referred to as the hourglass, just because it pinches down. But I'm really liking how this is setting up, because I kind of designed this alfalfa setup where it's a really natural transition between grain to grain. So essentially we're gonna have alfalfa that's gonna wrap completely around some standing tillable that's about 5.5 acres. And I just think this is gonna be a really cool location to set up a cutty back, to be able to identify, you know, some target deer down on this farm. But also it's just a cool spot where I want to hunt it so bad, but I just know that the wind's going to fluctuate in these types of locations. So I think that this is maybe long-term going to be a blind setup location, but regardless, it just sets up a really cool scenery for this property, because there's nothing better, in my opinion, than a really beautiful, well-maintained alfalfa field. Picking up another stick. Still seems like it's pretty active right now. So one of the things that I really enjoy about being in the outdoors is it's all about making memories, right? And especially down here on the farm, where it just feels like it means something more every single time I hunt down here. And every time I look at this tree, you know, even when we were doing all the tree removal a few years ago, you know, down here on this property, like this was one I specifically left because I knew it was gonna be a spot where it's gonna be great for a scrape tree. And one of the things we inherited with this farm was that essentially we knew that there was gonna be good deer density, and very quickly it was identified that there's a ton of deer down here, but there's not a lot of age structure when it comes to the buck specifically. That first year we hunted, it was pretty tough to identify targets. And then last year, there were a handful of targets that had kind of, you know, grown up a little bit and were 4 or 5 years old, that were kind of targets that I put on my hit list. And one of those deer was turkey. And he was kind of a deer I actually introduced last year when we were kind of doing this walk and talk down here on Area 52. And then I believe it was on October 26th, I had an encounter with him, and he was right underneath this tree. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to make it happen that day. But regardless, it'll be something where a buck of that caliber, to have it, you know, where I felt like the land management played into having an encounter with him, you know, I just felt like that's something that'll always stick with me and stick around here on Area 52.
Alright guys, it's the afternoon, October 26th, and I'm all set up. It's just a little after 4 o'clock right now. I'm down here on Area 52, and I'm set up kind of in that same area where I've been hunting quite a bit. Kind of after shrimp again tonight, but then a little update is that buck I called Turkey, who's kind of #1 on the hit list. I got my first trail camera photos on my farm of him last night. My neighbor and I we've been sharing a lot of photos. He's been more regular on them than he was on me, but finally got some photos of him. He looks really good. He's a good buck, but beautiful night, really calm conditions. Looking forward to it, and hopefully I'm in the front row seat to a good show tonight.
I mean, it looks a little rough right now because there's still yet more sticks to pick up. You know, that's one of the things they don't really talk about in the pamphlet of like land ownership, is just how many sticks you're gonna have to pick up on a property. So it's just been an ongoing battle with that. But this is a really cool inside corner, and I would be of the opinion that this is the best spot to hunt on my farm. There's a tree stand, there's a muddy that's actually up in this big old locust tree over here, but I wanted to enhance this inside corner and make it even better, where there actually used to be probably a 150-year-old oak tree that was laying dead on the ground here. So I moved that out of the way, kind of opened this up, and then this has actually been frost seeded to clover is what this has been seeded to. But the stand's gonna get relocated into this beautiful white oak over here on the corner. I think it's gonna be a really good spot. And then also, if I need to get mobile on them a little bit even more, we kind of have the blind kind of sitting behind you know, where we're located right now, where that's on the actual trailer. That was kind of a fun project that I did last year mid-season for late season hunting. And that's something that's gonna be, I think, come in handy for how much open area we have here on the north side of the farm. So we're just kind of walking through the timber ground a little bit, and this is some of the area where I've done some hinge cutting, but actually to my right, this is actually the stump of a big black oak. And that was something that really happened right after we did the walkthrough last year on Area 52, is that My wife and I actually elected to do a select harvest down here, and I'm a pretty firm advocate that when it comes to land management, you have to manage your timber acres no different than tillable acres, no different than your CRP acres, whatever it might be. They require management. And our timber down here, to my knowledge, had never had any type of harvest whatsoever. And so we elected to do a select harvest. I actually marked all the trees myself, so I identified the ones that I wanted to be taken off of it. And all of them were of pretty large diameter. I think the DBH, or diameter of breast height, for all the trees we selected was above 26 inches average, which that kind of shows you those are larger trees that we're selecting. But that really allowed some sunlight to kind of open up and hit the actual forest floor. And as you can see, you're really starting to see a green up down here on our farm, which is great because it feels like it's been dirt for so long, where it's really nice to start seeing some green up. And although in the short term, the disturbance like that doesn't really look the best, for long-term longevity of a property, it's great. And also to have a little bit of return on investment, you know, that's just a bonus on top. So one of the effects, or kind of the aftermath of logging a property, is that you always have the treetops that are, you know, kind of left on the actual property. And it can be a benefit for the bedding side of it, but also you can have treetops in locations that maybe it interferes or impacts the deer movement. Because I would say, you know, for sure, the first fall that we hunted this property, the creek lines that run through this property were absolutely travel corridors. But one of the things that happened during the actual logging process is that a lot of those treetops fell into the actual creek, so it kind of impacted how the deer are actually moving through this property. So one of the projects I want to definitely do this off season is I want to reopen those up, because not only were those travel corridors for the deer, and there were kind of movement patterns that I was trying to identify to set up, you know, maybe pinch points or tree stand locations. There were also locations a lot of times where I was putting in at the road, and I was using those to access tree stand locations. So I definitely want to get a few of those open up again this year. That was just something that the logging really didn't happen until the end of summer last year, and then by that time I was just kind of wanting things to settle down and kind of the deer to get back to somewhat normal patterns. But I definitely want to get those opened up and have those ready for next season, because I really think that that could be the difference, because access is paramount when you're talking about any time you're hunting a specific deer, because you know, having those encounters and being able to get in and out without them knowing that you're hunting them is critical to be able to have really close encounters with big bucks. Well, we're kind of wrapping up for today, and you know, I have a few projects I still want to get done while we're down here today. One of the things I always try to do when we're making our way down here to the farm is I'm always trying to maximize my trips. You know, it is a little ways from my house, and I kind of like that, where it's kind of a destination a little bit. But I got a couple Cuddy Trax cameras with me today that we're going to hang up on our way out today. But in the opening interview, I kind of talked about things I've kind of learned through this process, and I think that it's always been a learning process. You know, this is the first property we've owned. You know, land management is something that's very much in my blood. It's something I enjoy doing, but you can have a plan, and that plan is always going to change. You know, and I think that that's one of the things that I've learned right away, is that, you know, I had some big goals and stuff where I always feel like I want things to be done right away, you know, and it's not always instantaneous gratification in life, and land management is absolutely that, because managing the timber acres is something where ultimately it takes time. You know, 5 years for timber management is just a short blink of an eye. So that's something that I've definitely had to like kind of pull back the reins on myself a bit, is that like it's going to take time to get all these projects lined up, and I think that that's a good thing to learn. And I think another something that I've kind of picked up through that time is to have resources that I can reach out to. Kane Gillette and also Jeff Dietz have kind of become sounding boards for me. They're both members of the pro staff, and I feel like I'm calling them or texting them all the time about different crazy ideas, or maybe it's equipment that I want to buy for down here at the farm. And having a dialogue with individuals that you know that are interested in the same things, but also people that can have an honest conversation with you and tell you, hey, you know, maybe that's not the best idea, or have you thought about this, you know, type of thing too. Because, you know, I think that some of this stuff I'm fairly knowledgeable on, but it's also something too where there's always different perspectives on ways of looking at that stuff. And that's something I've tried to really take, you know, throughout this process and kind of evaluate. And I think the last thing that I've kind of identified through this process too is having relationships with your neighbors is like paramount through this process, because with us being a little ways from home, you know, being able to have a relationship with my neighbor where, you know, the alfalfa seeding, for example, you know, now I have a relationship with a local down here where he's essentially going to manicure a giant food plot for me, where protein's king when it comes to alfalfa. We worked out a deal where we're going to share some bales, you know, coming off the property. you know, I don't really have a big need for a bunch of alfalfa bales, but it's something that he needs as a farmer. And I think that just having that local presence, because I've been fortunate with my neighbors to the north of this property, you know, I can consider them great friends at this point in time. And that's been something that's really kind of been a fun part of this, but also something I feel like really solidified itself, that's really critical in this land management or even just property ownership stuff, is that have those relationships, especially if you're not here locally, if you're a stranger from the outside, develop those and kind of take the time to make sure that that's important, you know, for this land management. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed, you know, kind of having a revisit down here, down in Area 52. It's something that, you know, is really close to my heart, and I know that's something that my wife and I really enjoy spending time down here. And we appreciate you guys joining us this week on Midwest Whitetail, and hopefully you guys come back next Monday for another show.
Well, that's going to conclude this week's episode. You know, it's always fun to watch Zach apply his knowledge to a new piece of property, as we've watched him do it many times in the past, and we're hoping that that pays off for him big time this fall. And as far as the rest of the Midwest Whitetail team, I know that everybody's been busy getting food plots in, and quite frankly, it's our favorite time of the year. You know, it's when we get to put in all the hard work and just watch the plants sprout and grow, as it'll hopefully better our future come this fall. But moving forward here, I know that we're gonna have tons of content coming down the pipeline, and you guys won't wanna miss it. Thanks for tuning in to Midwest Whitetail.